Hi, welcome. My name is Charlotte. I love colorful and sparkly makeup. Yes, I know I'm wearing neutral makeup today, but we're just gonna have to go with it. But I love colorful and sparkly makeup, and sometimes I struggle with buying too much of it. This YouTube channel has really been part of my journey slash project to navigate my relationship with makeup consumption and sort of develop a healthier way of loving makeup. I try not to beat myself up for buying makeup, and I'm not here to say that you should do that yourself. But I also try not to make videos that are like centering buying things or glorifying buying things or normalizing buying a lot of things. So I don't do hauls. I also don't really do reviews. But I have bought a lot of makeup this year, and I kind of want to talk about it and show it on my channel in some way. So I decided to do kind of like an end of year roundup. What I've done is taken like a randomization app, the app Tiny Decisions, and I made a list of makeup items that I feel like I got to know a little bit so that I have enough to say about them. There are things that I've bought more recently that I don't really have my thoughts on yet. So I've left those off, and I've left off things that are kind of boring or that I don't really have anything to say about for whatever reason. First, if you happen to be new here or you're not subscribed to my channel yet, please consider subscribing and stick around. So here are the tiers I'm using. I'm going to pop them up on the screen. I decided to go with 6 categories because I have some pans, like some things I didn't like from the past year. I don't know if we'll get them or not, but I think they fall into 2 kind of distinct categories, which is things that I don't think are good, things that I don't think work, things that I don't think are as advertised. And then there's also things that just turned out not to be for me. I don't necessarily think they're bad products, but maybe the shade didn't line up with what I was hoping for, stuff like that. I think the other ones speak for themselves. I tend to like makeup. I do have a lot of things that I would rank within the God tier. We'll see if we end up rolling those. All right, I'm not necessarily going to do like a screen grab of this. I'm not very tech savvy, but let's just see what we get. Okay, Phytosurgence Deeply Rooted. So I'm gonna grab that. Phytosurgence is one of my favorite brands. I talk about their makeup a lot, I feel like, or I just use it a lot. So it's just sort of in the ether of my channel. I ended up getting 2 of their eyeshadows this year back in March, April. And the shade that I just rolled is Deeply Rooted. Funnily enough, it's not available anymore. This was one of their original line of eyeshadows. It's like a blue-brown kind of duochrome, but extremely subtle. This formula from Phytosurgence is very satiny, kind of dull, like it's not very shiny. It's not trying to be very shiny. So to me, it sort of functions like I kind of treat it just like a matte cream shadow. I also got from one of their other collections the shade Chilled Cherry, and this is a gorgeous, gorgeous, cool toned, kind of winey, mauve-y, like cherry wood. It's so hard to describe this color, and I think that's what I love about Phytosurgence so much, is just the nuance of tones that they offer throughout their collection. All their shades are really interesting, and they're sort of the kind of shades where you're like, where have you been all my life? This was exactly what I didn't know I needed. But you're really not getting that from other brands and other collections. Chilled Cherry happens to come from their Weathered Woods collection, which is all themed around like distressed wood. It's just such a beautiful concept, such a beautiful execution. Chilled Cherry is a really nice shade, but I really like Deeply Rooted as well. It's more of a warm base. It's essentially just a warm toned brown, and it has this little hint of blue, but I don't usually like layer this on enough to really get a shift to speak of. But what I use this for is more like when I'm doing no makeup, and I mean like no mascara, no concealer, like just a little bit of tinted moisturizer, maybe some bronzer, and just like contouring around the eye. However, I don't think this formula is gonna be for everybody. It's very like dry and dense, and you really have to, I put this on with a brush, you really have to dig your brush in there to get kind of a light wash of pigment. It's very easy to use in that sense, like you're not gonna overdo it on the eye if you're using a brush. But overall, it's not really my preferred style of eyeshadow. I prefer powder eyeshadows, I prefer more pigment, I prefer more sparkle. So I think I'm gonna put this in the like it category, even though I think it is, you know, a really beautiful line of shades. It's just the formula is not necessarily like my perfect formula. Our second roll. Okay, this is the e.l.f. Jelly Pop Primer. I hate it. This might fall under the category of like not for me. I tend not to be a primer person, but I had heard such good things about this one. I've also tried the Power Grip Primer from e.l.f., which is very similar to this, and I don't love that, but even so, I kept believing people when they said that this was just like next level. I think people like it because it's a dewy primer that also sort of like enhances the wear time of your makeup, supposedly. What I hate about this though is that no matter how long I leave it to set, it says 30 seconds on the back of the tube. I've heard content creators say they leave it for like as much as 10 minutes, and I've tried both. It always lifts up what's underneath it. Even if it doesn't do it when I'm laying down this primer, I'll go in with my sponge to put on my foundation and it starts lifting like white. And I swear to God, it's lifting my SPF underneath the primer. It just turns into a mess. It's just unsalvageable at that point. It might be because I'm using a sponge and not a brush. I don't really know. Like, I've troubleshooted it a bit, but at the end of the day, it's just too much of a risk to put on. Like, I don't usually have time to redo all my skincare, redo my SPF, wait for my SPF to like set because I don't want to disturb it. I mean, if you're getting your SPF coming up, obviously you're losing the SPF protection. So it's just like never worth it to me to really try and sit there and troubleshoot it. So for me, this is a complete pan. I will probably get rid of this. I kind of am tempted to keep it simply because like every time I see it again on the internet, I'm like, you know what, I can fix her. Like, I'll just try it again. So honestly, I'm like slightly worried that if I did declutter this, I would end up repurchasing it in like a year. But I don't like this and I don't believe in it. And so I'm putting this in not good. Okay, another Phytosurgence product. I rolled the shade Condensate. Most of the things I get from Phytosurgence do work well for me, and the blushes are one of like, I think the biggest hits I've had from Phytosurgence. I own 5 of them at this point, and 4 of them were purchased this year. So at the beginning of the year, like in March, at the end of my no-buy that I was on for the first few months of this year, I got 3. I got the shade Ember, which is like a kind of an orange tangerine shade. I also got Swelter, which is like a strawberry red. And I also got this shade Condensate, which I just rolled. Condensate is like a dusty lavender almost, kind of a mauve-y color. And it sort of blends out on my cheeks to like a brown pink. And then just a few weeks ago, I ordered this shade Simmer. They describe it as a violet toned pink. I think it's just sort of like a neutral pink, I would say, leaning cool, but on my skin tone, it kind of blends out to a neutral pink. Condensate is my least favorite. I liked it more when I initially tried it, but I think the more I use it, the more I notice that it does look a little bit bruisey on me. And I'm starting to lean more in the direction of like vibrant blush shades. I think sometimes they can look natural as a flush just being sheared out without having a lot of brown. Even though I used to only wear brown blush. So I'm evolving, but I've been going a lot more for the brighter tones. I actually have to credit Swelter for that, I think. I was so pleasantly surprised with the way Swelter looks on my cheeks, especially because it looks so cool toned. Like, it looks like it's gonna look like hot pink, when you look at it in the pan, but it just blends out to this beautiful reddish flush. Simmer, I think, as well. Super flushy. And people love the shade Condensate. Like, cool, fair-skinned people love Condensate. It's a very unusual blush shade, so people find it really challenging to find a shade that looks this way on them. So I think, like, you know, no knocks to Condensate. It's more like, I like it, but it's not made for me. And I like the formula. It's pigmented, but I don't find it challenging to use. Yeah, like 10 out of 10. I love this blush formula. So even though the thing I rolled was Condensate, I think it seems unfair to judge all the blushes based on how I feel about this one shade. So I'm gonna split them up. I'm gonna put Condensate just under Like It, but all the rest of my Phytosurgence shades have to go under God tier. Okay, I just rolled the Alter Ego Daylight palette. Mine is actually just missing one shade up at the top here, but it's just a deep brown. I have that pulled out for a custom palette right now. But I made a video about this palette a couple months back. I can link it below. I already shared some thoughts I had about this palette. I was disappointed in the shimmer formula. There are a couple really beautiful sparkly shades, like this shade Divine is a really brightening inner corner shade with a lovely pink blushy undertone. This shade Mist is the standout of the palette. It's the sparkly topper that's kind of just like sheer silvery, kind of like space cowboy kind of vibes. But even so, they weren't really up to my preference when it comes to how sparkly I like things, and I just have more beautiful sparkly things in my collection at this point. If I didn't, I think I would definitely have been a lot more impressed with this formula. What I did like about this palette a lot are the mattes, and I do use them. Like, some of them have become my go-to everyday mattes. I love anything with like a rosy undertone, so I love that you have like warm rosy shades, you have cool taupey rosy shades, you have some peachy shades. I use the mattes all the time. Because I'm not a matte lover, like mattes don't really excite me, I think I have to place this palette just in Like It. Yeah, and I do also, like, this is one of few palettes that I keep assembled as a palette, so I see the appeal, don't get me wrong. Like, I see the appeal of having a curated palette of neutral shades. I do think of this palette like if I want to create a really easy look for just going out somewhere where I need to look respectable. Absolutely, this is the perfect thing for that scenario. And I think that the formula in here would be satisfying for a lot of people. It just depends on what look you like on your own eyes. For me, I think it's a Like It, but that feels kind of mean at the same time. Not a bad palette. I do get a lot of use out of this. Okay, we're on to number 5. I feel like I end up being so negative on this channel about makeup I buy, which makes me seem unhinged because I keep buying makeup. But the fact is, I love a lot of these products that are sitting in front of me, but I just rolled another pan, and that is the CoverGirl Clean Fresh powder. People really like this powder, so it could be that it works for some people. For me, it's just not mattifying enough, and it's not as if I like a really matte base. If I'm honest, I probably watched a review of this where someone was like, it doesn't even look like I'm wearing powder, and I was like, great, that sounds amazing. But my use case for most of the powder that I end up using is to set my brows before putting down brow makeup. This is a specific use case because I happen to not have eyebrow hairs for the most part. So I really need it to be matte, or else A, there's nothing for the makeup to stick to, and B, I end up with shiny brows that just look painted on. I found that compared to the previous powder I had been using before this, I would try and really layer this up on my brows to get just to a basic matte finish. And at that point, it would really be like clinging, it would be breaking up, it would be looking super heavy and caked. This powder didn't work when I tried to layer it. And even layered, it never really got to the level of matte that I needed for my brows. I think I can use this up by just like setting my lids. It'll probably take me like 10 years, but that's really my use case for it now. Because I also don't really like it on my face. I find it also looks a little bit heavy on my face. So unfortunately, this was a miss for me. And because it failed so spectacularly so many times, I kind of feel like putting it in not good. If you want a powder that looks powdery but has none of the benefits of a powder, then maybe you'll like this. Okay, so the next item I just rolled is this lipstick from Merit. This is their matte signature lipstick in the shade Vermilion. It's a vibrant orangey red shade. I got this back in April, and I've really enjoyed like vibrant orange reds in the past. I was excited about this formula because people really seemed to like it, and I think it's so alluring, like the idea of a matte lipstick that isn't drying, that isn't a matte liquid lipstick, and yet is going to be able to hold its own as like a bright, bold color. I think ultimately I have to learn at some point that that doesn't really exist. If it's not uncomfortable, then it's not transfer proof. And if it's not transfer proof, it's going to be difficult to wear as a very bright, bold color. And this is no exception. It doesn't set down. I find it a little bit high maintenance, but it is definitely on the comfortable side for a matte lipstick. The thing that I really don't love about this is actually the shade, which really surprised me. It looks like a very like wearable orange red, and it does have this really interesting muted quality. It is especially obvious when I swatch it against another more saturated bright orange red. You can see that this has, I don't even know what it's cut with, because it's not brownish, it's not white. I feel like it must be cut with like maybe black or gray. I think for a lot of people that's going to be a huge selling point, and it probably makes it a lot more wearable. For me, I think I prefer a lot of saturation for myself and my complexion and just how I feel most beautiful, I guess. So for me, I would put this on and it would look kind of strangely washed out. And this is something that I'm like learning more this year. So I think like I had a few flops among the makeup I bought this year that was for this reason, that things turned out to be too gray, too muted. And it seems weird that I kept making that mistake, but I think it took a few of those for me to like learn that that was a preference I had. I think this is a not for me, and there's like no real love lost between me and this lipstick because I don't think this kind of formula is really practical for me, but really the thing that deters me from wearing this is the shade. I'm planning to declutter this. I've already sort of come to terms with that. That's okay with me. I mean, it was expensive for what it is, I think, but I really like the Merit Signature lip formula, and maybe it's worth just pulling that out and talking about it because I feel like I've been so negative, but this shade was a real favorite for me this year. This is their signature lip formula in the shade Tiger, and it's a brick red. Super, super wearable. This feels to me like I'm wearing a red lipstick. Like I get the sort of vibe and the cachet a little bit of a red lipstick, but it's also the kind of lipstick that I can apply without a mirror. You know, I can pair this with an eye look that's a little bit more intense. Like, it doesn't come with the added inconveniences of a red lipstick. So this is a really practical shade for me, and I also think it's flattering and beautiful. This was a fail, this was a fave. I think this is just not for me. It's not the fault of the formula or the color, but this one I'm gonna throw up there under love it. So that's technically been 7 items, but I'm gonna lump in the 2 lipsticks and we will say we're at 6. So rolling for a 7th. Another Phytosurgence product. This is the shade Golden Warmth from their bronzer line. Yeah, okay, mine comes out of the pan. This is such a strange, like hard, waxy formula, like super stiff. It sounds so weird, it sounds so off-putting, but I love it. I love this formula. A lot of the Phytosurgence products have this weird texture. I feel like a stiff cream should kind of be in its own category, because like cream products tend to offer this like emollients. You end up with a lot of product, not always necessarily a lot of pigment, but you're either gonna get a lot of pigment or you're gonna get a lot of texture or you're gonna get a lot of both. But these stiff creams that you get from Phytosurgence, the beauty of them is that you pick up so little, and so you really get to like build the product in these sheer layers. I never worry that I'm going to mess it up. Like, that's worth so much, you know? Especially for a step like bronzer, because bronzer can go so wrong. Like, it can look so weird if you do bronzer wrong. And Phytosurgence bronzers were really the first ones where I was like, yes, it like almost clicked for me, like this is why people wear bronzer, because before I didn't really, like I was like, why would I want to make my face look more orange than it is? Like, why would I want it to look like I'm wearing more makeup than I am? Like, I don't know, it just never worked. Then the first time I tried these bronzers, they just worked, and I was like, oh yeah, okay, my face looks a little sculpted, my face looks a little bit sun-kissed, like all the things that bronzer was supposed to be doing all along. My god tier Phytosurgence blush is the shade Rosy Daybreak, which has a rosy undertone. It feels literally like not like bronzer, like it just looks like my skin. So that's my god tier. This one I ordered after because I wanted to try their sort of like golden toned shades. They have rosy and golden like counterparts for every depth level in their range, which again, they just kill it with their ranges and the colors. So I wanted to try this, but ultimately I don't like it as much as that first rosy shade that I fell in love with. It's not too yellow, it's not too orange, but it is more just like noticeably warm, whereas the rosy one really does just feel like it's shaping my cheeks. Beautiful product. I'm gonna put it under Love It because this isn't my favorite shade, but like, that's still pretty good. This one is highly specific. So this is a lavender color corrector from LA Girl. LA Girl is really like the first place I would recommend you go if you are looking for a color corrector. They're so affordable and they have so many options. e.l.f. came out with some good color correctors. I think it might have been last year, but LA Girl has better options. Like for example, they have like a fair peach and then like a deeper orangey peach. And then they also have purple, which doesn't exist in the e.l.f. line. Now, purple is supposed to color correct yellow, or at least that's what it's complementary to. The way people describe it is a lot harder to figure out than, say, like a green color corrector, which is pretty straightforward. You know, it's to correct red. Nobody really says, like, oh, you use this to color correct yellow on your face. They'll say, like, you use it to brighten your face, or color correct dullness or sallowness, which like what do those words mean? I don't totally know. Sometimes when people say brighten, they're literally talking about lightening their skin tone. It's certainly not what I'm looking for out of a color corrector. But I personally have yellow tinted freckles on my skin. I do often feel when I'm not looking my best, when I haven't had a lot of sleep, when I've gotten too much sun, like when I look sick, I think I often look yellow. Maybe that is something that's natural and native to my skin tone, or maybe my freckles are leaving some sort of unnatural cast over my natural skin tone. I don't totally know, but I do find that when I put on a white-based lavender corrector, I don't know, I can make my skin tone look a little bit clearer with like very little coverage. I like to think that that like veil of lavender is doing some correcting, I guess, that is bringing my skin tone closer to where it looks most natural, if that makes sense. This is definitely not going to be for everybody, but I think it's worth mentioning because it's so unusual to see people talking about purple correctors and see how people use them. I happen to use this like all over my cheeks in this area because this is where my freckles are concentrated. Like I might use it all over my cheeks underneath foundation or concealer, or I might even just do like an extremely sheer wash of it without anything over top. That's a little trickier because you obviously don't want to look purple. The other place I tend to get yellowness can be around the mouth and the chin area. I think that might be a little more common for people to get sallowness there. I'm not trying to like create problems for you if you don't have this as a problem, but if that's ever something that you've thought about wanting to like color correct and you have not been able to find that information easily, then yeah, that's how I do it, and I learned from, you know, trial and error with this. It really, there's not a lot of information out there about color correcting yellow. The other thing that this is great for is mixing into foundations that are too yellow, which is very common. This particular lavender corrector does have a white base. I don't think that LA Girl has a deeper version of this in their range, unfortunately. So keep that in mind. But this has been a really good discovery for me this year. And I don't think the formula itself is necessarily anything special, although I don't think it's bad. I think I'm gonna put this under Love It. Okay, I think this is gonna be number 9. Peach Perfect. So I got the e.l.f. Camo Liquid Blush in the shade Peach Perfect. I really like it. Yeah, I have never had success with liquid blushes in the past. Usually I just found that liquid blushes would like lift and just be too fussy. This one I think is pretty foolproof. I will say it might be because the shade is so light and relatively close to my skin tone for a blush. So I can't speak to the other shades in this range, but I had kind of been on the lookout for a blush that was this light. So I'm gonna put it under Love It. I mean, formula is innocuous. Liquid blush isn't my preferred format, but it works and the color is great. All right, I'll be honest, I just skipped a few because I wanted to get to something more interesting to talk about. This is the ColourPop Glowing Lip in the shade Indulge Me. The packaging sucks on this. It's already like all worn away and the cap broke on like the first day I owned it. But I love this. I love the shade. I picked this out both for the shade and the formula because I thought it might be a dupe for e.l.f. Golden Pear. I don't know if you should do this, but if you were to go back to my first video that I ever posted on this channel, it was like an overview of my favorite makeup at that time, and e.l.f. Golden Pear was my favorite lipstick. It was beautiful. I had bought it after it was discontinued. I found it on Amazon and I paid a small upcharge for it because I saw it on Hannah Louise Poston and I loved the look of it, and it was just a beautiful, like, sheer peachy golden color, just so beautiful. And I ended up losing it. Like, I hadn't even had it that long. It was long enough that it was like my favorite lipstick at that time and I was carrying it around in my purse and stuff. but I lost it. And so I never got to pan that. I never found it. I've moved since I lost it. I thought that this might be a dupe, and I kind of think it is. It's really been too long for me to compare the shades like objectively, so I'm not sure. But it has that same really sheer, dewy kind of formula. Not glossy, but like dewy. It's a really nice nude shade if you have warm toned light skin. Really beautiful. I love this as a go-to lip shade, and I like to think that it is a reincarnation of my beloved Golden Pear. And that brings us to 10 randomized products that I purchased this year, plus a few extras thrown in there. I might end up doing like a follow-up to this with just like some favorites, but that's the video. Thank you so much for watching. If you watched, I hope that you will come back to my channel to continue seeing these products cycle through my collection, because as much as I sometimes overbuy makeup and as much as I have a pretty large collection at this point, I do always want to cycle through my makeup and use it. That really is the point. It's not all about the dopamine hit of buying something. Thank you again for joining me, and I hope to see you very soon. Bye!